What's going on, guys? I'm going to talk today about the Soweto Uprising. It happened on June 16th, 1976. And the Soweto Uprising occurred when black South African high school students were protesting the Afrikaans language being taught for their social studies classes, as well as their math classes. And the reason that they had protested was because the Afrikaans language was the language of their oppressors. Now, there were plenty of Afrikaners that were against the apartheid system, but the 1948 government that enacted apartheid was predominantly Afrikaner South Africans. And they were now making the Afrikaans language the mandatory language for the black education system in South Africa. It was called the Bantu education system back then, and that was a derogatory term chastising black South Africans as well. The black South African students, particularly in Soweto, had said they'd had enough of it, and there were teachers, black teachers, who had just gotten their teaching jobs, and they had so many of them protested as well, and they were about to have a job with benefits and things of that nature, but they said it was the right thing to protest because the Afrikaans language should not be mandatory for these students. And then also it was the Bantu education system was designed to subjugate black South Africans even more. So it was a protest against the Afrikaans language being the mandatory language, but also against the entire education system for black South Africans at the time. And the protest occurred, and where the reason that the black South Africans in the protest received so much international support is because the South African police had shot Hector Peterson, and Hector Peterson was a minor under 18 years of age, and they saw his family. There was a picture of his family members carrying him carrying him dead after he got shot. And then also, after many of the protesters got shot, they were loaded up on trucks like dead bodies in war. And many of these protesters were not allowed a proper burial. They were just buried without a funeral, without a procession, or anything of that nature. And it was just that sick of a situation. But one thing I didn't even note is that this is not to hate on any one group, because there were about 400 white students at the University of Wits University, or University of Witwatersrand, but more commonly known as Wits University. And they were protesting in favor of the Soweto protesters, protesting in solidarity with them. And the police broke up that demonstration and arrested quite a few demonstrators there. And Tony Clue, who was a white South African journalist, is now living in Sydney, Australia. He went to cover it, and yes, there were a few pro-government white people at that uprising. There were a few suspected informants, but the vast majority of the white people there, they stood in solidarity with the Soweto protesters, and Tony Clue had pointed that out. And Richard Welch, while he was not at the demonstration, he was a teacher, and he offered some private education, or some alternative education, to the Bantu education system. And when the black South Africans were not in school, he taught and tutored a lot of them. And a lot of white South African churches were in charge of that and helped do that, so the black South Africans could be proud of their culture and then receive a quality education, something that the South African government did not provide for them at the time. And they did an interview, both of them did an interview with The Guardian last year on its the 40th anniversary of the Soweto Uprising. Last year it was the 40th anniversary. And so we need to remember the Soweto Uprising. As I've said before, that shouldn't be the only part of South African history that people are talking about, but it's not something that needs to be taken out of history textbooks. And I commend Whoopi Goldberg for starring in that 1992 musical, Sarafina, that talks about the Soweto Uprising. And it's set in South Africa. And immediate progress was not made on many things, but the Transkei region in the Eastern Cape Province was granted its independence from apartheid South Africa, and they were allowed to govern themselves. And so that was a progress of not all blacks in the South Africa region being subjugated to apartheid laws. So anyways, hope everyone's doing well. Take care. God bless, and bye bye.